Imagine being a child watching your family unravel, your father chasing one doomed dream after another, your mother struggling to keep food on the table, and your little sister slipping away to a disease you barely understand. This was the childhood of Milton Hershey, a boy born into hardship in 1857 in rural Pennsylvania. His father, Henry Hershey, had an insatiable appetite for risky ventures, from oil drilling to tree planting, none of which bore fruit. Each failure left the family poorer, forcing them to move repeatedly, never settling, never secure. His mother, Fanny Hershey, was the backbone of the household, trying to shield young Milton and his sister Serena from the crushing weight of poverty. But even she couldn't protect them from the harshest blows of life. When a brutal winter hit, both children fell sick. While Milton recovered, Serena succumbed to scarlet fever at just 4 years old. Her death was more than just a family tragedy. It was a turning point. As Milton stood at his sister's graveside, he made a quiet vow. He would escape the cycle of failure and poverty that defined his family. He would find a way to succeed, no matter the cost. At 10 years old, Milton Hershey wasn't dreaming of chocolate empires. He was just trying to survive. With school behind him and his family's finances in shambles, he took whatever work he could find. His first real job was with a local printer, Sam Ernst, who ran a German-English newspaper. But instead of learning a valuable trade, Milton found himself trapped in a world of ink-stained hands and endless monotony. The work was dull, the boss was harsh, and worst of all, his father had locked him into a 5-year contract. Desperate to escape, Milton did something drastic. He threw his hat into a printing machine, jamming the gears and bringing production to a halt. The stunt got him fired instantly, and for the first time in his life, he felt relief. Rather than scolding him, his mother saw an opportunity. She and her sister Maddie arranged for Milton to work as an apprentice at Joseph Royer's confectionery shop in Lancaster. The difference was night and day. Here, instead of ink and paper, there was sugar and cream. Instead of the endless hum of printing presses, there was the rhythmic stirring of caramel bubbling over a stove. Milton was fascinated by the process, drawn in by the alchemy of turning raw ingredients into something delightful. But Royer, skeptical of young apprentices, kept him on the sidelines, assigning him to menial tasks like sweeping floors and delivering orders. Fanny Hershey, however, wasn't going to let her son be sidelined. She personally offered to pay Royer to properly teach Milton the art of candy making. With that, the doors to a new world opened. Milton absorbed everything, mixing techniques, pricing strategies, even where to source the best ingredients. He had found his passion, and for the first time, he wasn't just working to survive. He was working towards something bigger. Success was within his grasp, until it wasn't. At just 19, Milton Hershey took his first daring leap into entrepreneurship, opening a candy shop in Philadelphia during the 1876 World's Fair. The timing seemed perfect. Millions of visitors from around the world were flooding into the city, eager to experience the latest innovations and indulge in sweet treats. Milton, ever the visionary, wanted his confections to stand out. He installed a clever air chute that carried the aroma of fresh candy from his basement kitchen to the street, luring passersby into his shop. It worked. Customers came, sales grew, and for a moment, it seemed like he had cracked the code to success. But fortune can be fickle. When the excitement of the fair faded, so did the crowds. Then came the economic downturn that swept through the country like a storm, dragging businesses under with it. Sugar prices skyrocketed, making candy more expensive to produce, and Milton's small shop struggled to stay afloat. To survive, he pivoted, selling his sweets wholesale to other stores, cutting costs wherever he could. But it wasn't enough. He borrowed money from his uncles, hoping that just a little more time would turn things around. Instead, the debts piled up, and his once promising business crumbled. The final blow came in a letter from his family. His uncles, who had supported him through his venture, had lost faith. They refused to loan him another cent and urged him to shut down. At just 24, Milton Hershey was bankrupt. His dreams of success had collapsed. And worse, he had let down the people who believed in him. But failure, as he would later realize, wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something far greater. Failure could have broken him, but instead, it led him to his next lesson. With nothing left in Philadelphia, Milton Hershey followed a desperate invitation from his father to join him in Leadville, Colorado, where silver fever had taken hold. But by the time Milton arrived, the gold rush had turned to dust, and his father's dreams, like so many before, had crumbled. This time, however, Milton wasn't going to chase empty promises. Instead, he found work at a small candy shop in Denver, where he discovered something revolutionary, a new way to make caramels. At the time, most caramel makers used paraffin to extend shelf, but this shop had a different secret: fresh milk. The result? a richer, creamier caramel that melted in the mouth instead of turning waxy. Milton was captivated. He spent months studying the process, memorizing every detail, knowing that this single discovery could change his fortune. Armed with this knowledge, he left Colorado determined to make caramels his next big break. New York was his chosen battleground. With money borrowed from his ever-supportive Aunt Mattie, he opened another candy shop, hoping to dazzle the city with his Denver-style caramels. And at first, it worked. Customers loved them. But New York was ruthless. The market was crowded, and established confectioners had already built their empires. Milton's shop struggled against fierce competition, and soon the debts piled up again. His father convinced him to add cough drops to the product, a risky move that pitted him against the well-known Smith Brothers brand. It was a fight he couldn't win. The financial pressure became unbearable, and within a few years, history repeated itself. Milton was bankrupt again. Most would have given up, but for Milton Hershey, failure wasn't a stop sign. It was a detour. He had learned something invaluable. Not all candy was created equal. If he was going to succeed, he couldn't just sell sweets. He had to create something so irresistible, so unique that no one could compete. And this time, he knew exactly where to start. Some men run from failure. Milton Hershey ran straight through it. Bankrupt for the second time, he returned to Lancaster, his hometown, not as a prodigal son, but as a man with nothing left to lose. His uncles, exhausted by his failures, refused to lend him another cent, branding him the black sheep of the family, just like his father. But Milton wasn't his father. He didn't chase luck, he created it. Determined to make one last stand, he turned to his former bookkeeper, William Lebkicker, who, against all odds, believed in him. With a small loan and the few supplies salvaged from his failed New York shop, Hershey got to work. This time, he wasn't making just any candy. He was making his milk-based caramels, the same secret recipe he had learned in Colorado. Without a storefront or a factory, he loaded a handbasket with caramels and took to the streets, selling them one by one. Slowly, word spread. Customers loved the creamy texture, the rich flavor. This wasn't the waxy caramel they were used to. As demand grew, he reinvested every penny, upgrading from a basket to a rented pushcart, then to a small production space. But even with growing sales, he was barely surviving. Then came the letter that changed everything. A British importer, impressed by the long shelf life and superior taste of Hershey's caramels, placed an order. An enormous one. It was an all-or-nothing moment. The problem? Milton didn't even have the funds to produce the order, let alone ship it overseas. So he did something bold. He marched into the bank, already burdened with a $700 loan, and asked for another $1,000. The banker refused. But then, moved by Hershey's sheer determination and the taste of his caramels, the man made a stunning decision. He personally signed for the loan himself. Days later, the caramels were shipped, and then silence. Days stretched into weeks. The deadline for the loan loomed, and Hershey had no way to pay it back. Just as it seemed his third attempt at business would end like the others, a letter finally arrived from England. Inside was a check, 500 British pounds, worth nearly $65,000 in today's money. Milton had done it. His debts were gone, his business was saved, and with that single order, he had stepped into a new world of success. The Lancaster Caramel Company took off, filling factories with workers and shipping his signature caramels across the globe. Within a few years, Milton Hershey was no longer just a struggling candy maker. He was a millionaire. But even as his caramel empire soared, he was already looking ahead towards something sweeter, something even bigger, something that, once again, would change everything. For most people, the 1893 Chicago World's Fair was a spectacle, a dazzling showcase of the latest inventions, from the first Ferris wheel to electric lights that made the night glow. But for Milton Hershey, it was something more. It was fate. As he wandered through the massive exhibition halls, something unusual caught his eye. A booth filled with whirring, clanking machines from Germany. They weren't just metal and gears. They were the future. These machines could do something incredible, mass-produce chocolate. At the time, chocolate was a luxury reserved for the wealthy, made in small batches by European artisans. The idea of making it affordable, of turning it into something for the everyday American, hadn't been realized yet. But as Hershey stood watching cocoa beans transform into smooth, rich chocolate, a thought took hold. What if he could bring this to America? What if he could make chocolate not just for the elite, but for everyone? Without hesitation, he made a bold move. He bought the entire chocolate-making setup on the spot and had it shipped back to Lancaster. His caramel company was thriving, but he sensed something even bigger on the horizon. Once the machines arrived, he wasted no time. He carved out a section of his caramel factory and began experimenting. It wasn't easy. Chocolate making was an art, one dominated by the Swiss, who guarded their methods like treasure. Hershey had no roadmap, no mentor, but what he did have was relentless curiosity. Trial after trial, he worked, testing different techniques, tweaking ingredients, failing, learning. He wasn't just making chocolate, he was reinventing it. The rich, bitter European formulas weren't what he wanted. He needed something smoother, something creamier, something uniquely American. Using the same philosophy that had made his caramels a success, fresh milk, he began refining his recipe. By 1894, his efforts had crystallized into something extraordinary. He founded the Hershey Chocolate Company as a subsidiary of his caramel business, selling cocoa, sweet chocolate, and baking chocolate. But he wasn't satisfied with just being another chocolate supplier. He had a bigger dream, a vision no one else could see yet. Chocolate, not caramel, was the future, and he was about to stake everything on it. Chocolate had always been an indulgence for the wealthy, an imported luxury wrapped in exclusivity. But Milton Hershey wasn't interested in making treats for the elite. He wanted to bring chocolate to the masses. The challenge? Milk chocolate was notoriously difficult to produce. The Swiss had perfected it, using a secretive process that made their creamy confections world famous. But their methods were locked away, and no American company had cracked the code. Hershey, however, had one advantage that no one else did: his experience with fresh milk. While most chocolate makers relied on powdered milk, which gave the final product a dull taste and brittle texture, Hershey was convinced that fresh milk was the key to something smoother, something better. He and his team spent years experimenting, testing different methods, failing again and again. But just when it seemed impossible, an unexpected breakthrough happened. Not in a high-tech lab, but in his own caramel factory. A former employee named Johnny Schmalbach found a way to condense fresh milk without burning it, creating a mixture that was both creamy and long-lasting. Hershey recognized it instantly. This was the missing piece. With this innovation, he had something no one else in America had: a formula for mass-producing affordable milk chocolate. In 1900, he launched the Hershey's Milk Chocolate Bar, selling it for just 5 cents. It was a revolution. For the first time, the average person could enjoy smooth, delicious milk chocolate without paying a fortune. Sales exploded. But Hershey wasn't done yet. In 1906, he introduced a product so simple yet so iconic that it would define the brand for generations: Hershey's Kisses. Small, bite-sized drops of chocolate wrapped in foil with a signature paper plume, they became an instant hit. Then, in 1908, he added almonds to his chocolate bars, creating another bestseller that remains popular over a century later. With these products, Hershey didn't just build a company. He changed the industry forever. What had once been an exclusive European delicacy was now a staple in every American home. And as the chocolate empire grew, so did Hershey's ambition. He wasn't just making candy anymore. He was about to build something even bigger. Milton Hershey didn't just want to build a chocolate empire. He wanted to build a legacy. As his company flourished, he saw an opportunity to create something more than just a factory. He envisioned a place where his workers wouldn't just punch in and out, but where they could live, grow, and thrive. Instead of setting up in an industrial city filled with slums and overcrowded tenements, he looked to the open countryside, purchasing 1,200 acres of farmland in Dairy Church, Pennsylvania, the town where he was born. But soon, it would bear a new name: Hershey. Unlike the grim factory towns that dominated the era, Hershey wanted his town to be a model of progress. He constructed modern homes with electricity, running water, and tree-lined streets. Workers had access to a bank, a department store, a library, and even an amusement park. There was a grand hotel, a community center, and a sports arena, all designed to give families a sense of pride in where they lived. It was an industrial utopia, and at its heart stood the massive 6-acre Hershey chocolate factory, the engine that powered the town's prosperity. But perhaps his most meaningful contribution came in 1909, when he and his wife, Kitty, founded the Hershey Industrial School, a home and educational institution for orphaned boys. Hershey had never forgotten his own childhood struggles: the poverty, the uncertainty, the feeling of being trapped by circumstances beyond his control. He wanted to change that for others. The school provided food, shelter, education, and a future for children who had none. It was a cause so close to his heart that years later, Hershey made an extraordinary decision. He quietly transferred his entire fortune, including ownership of the Hershey Company, to a trust that would fund the school in perpetuity. While other industrialists built empires for their own wealth and power, Hershey built his for others. His town wasn't just a place of business. It was a community, a home, and for many, a second chance at life. The school he founded continues today as the Milton Hershey School, one of the wealthiest and most well-funded private schools in the United States. But at the time, Hershey was far from finished. His vision extended beyond Pennsylvania, beyond chocolate, and into an unexpected new frontier, one that would take him to the shores of Cuba. Grief can break a man, or it can push him towards something greater. In 1915, Milton Hershey lost the love of his life. His wife, Kitty, had been his constant companion, his confidant, and his greatest supporter. Despite his wealth, despite access to the best doctors, there was nothing he could do to save her from pneumonia. Heartbroken, Hershey couldn't bear to stay in the home they had built together, surrounded by memories that now felt like ghosts. So, like he had always done in moments of crisis, he threw himself into his work. But this time, his vision extended beyond Pennsylvania. It stretched all the way to Cuba. While visiting the island, Hershey saw something familiar, a land of potential. Cuba was rich in sugarcane, the key ingredient in his chocolate, and he saw an opportunity not only to secure a stable supply for his growing company, but also to build something lasting. Just as he had done in Pennsylvania, he didn't just construct a factory, he built a town. He established Central Hershey, a fully developed community with homes, schools, hospitals, and recreational facilities for his workers. Unlike other sugar plantations that exploited labor, Hershey ensured fair wages, good living conditions, and modern infrastructure, earning the respect of the Cuban people. But his vision was about to collide with history. In 1914, war broke out in Europe, and by 1917, the United States had joined the fight. As the war raged, food supplies became scarce, and sugar, one of the most essential commodities, was rationed. Many companies struggled, but Hershey had prepared for this moment. With his Cuban sugar mills in full operation and a thriving chocolate factory back home, he struck a deal with the U.S. Army. Hershey's chocolate bars would become a staple in military rations, providing soldiers with a high-energy, morale-boosting treat on the battlefield. By the end of the war, Hershey had not only kept his company afloat, he had expanded it. His chocolate had reached soldiers across the world, turning the Hershey brand into a household name. And while other businesses suffered from post-war economic instability, Hershey's self-sufficient supply chain allowed him to keep prices low and sales strong. But even as his company reached new heights, Hershey himself was changing. With Kitty gone and no children to inherit his fortune, he began thinking less about profits and more about purpose. His next move would not be about business. It would be about securing a legacy that would outlive even him. By the time Milton Hershey stepped away from his company in 1944, he had done more than build a business. He had reshaped an industry, transformed a town, and left behind a legacy of generosity that would ripple through generations. Unlike so many industrial titans of his time, Hershey never measured success by wealth alone. He measured it by impact, and that impact was everywhere. Hershey's chocolate had become a symbol of comfort, a staple in homes across America, and even a necessity in times of war. During World War II, his company created the D-Ration Bar, a specially designed chocolate bar for U.S. soldiers. So durable it could withstand extreme conditions, and so energy-packed it became a battlefield essential. Millions of these bars were shipped overseas, further cementing Hershey's place in American history. Yet despite his global success, he remained devoted to his greatest passion, giving back. In an unprecedented act of philanthropy, Hershey had already transferred the majority of his company's stock to the Milton Hershey School Trust, ensuring that orphaned and disadvantaged children would continue to receive an education and a future long after he was gone. Today, that trust controls a significant portion of the Hershey Company, making it one of the wealthiest private schools in the world. Hershey's decision to invest in people rather than hoard his fortune was rare in his era, but it ensured that his wealth had a lasting purpose. On October 13, 1945, Milton Hershey passed away at the age of 88 in the town that bore his name. His departure was quiet, but his impact was anything but. The Hershey Chocolate Company continued to grow, adapting to new markets, introducing new products, and expanding its global reach. Decades after his death, the company he built now stands as one of the largest chocolate manufacturers in the world, with a market cap exceeding $44 billion. Milton Hershey never lived to see the full scale of what he created, but perhaps he didn't need to. His name wasn't just stamped on chocolate bars. It was etched into the heart of a town, a school, and a brand that continues to bring joy to millions. He had once vowed, as a hungry boy standing over his sister's grave, that he would create a better life. And in the end, he didn't just succeed. He built something sweeter than chocolate. He built a legacy.